The station hung in the void like a fragile gem, suspended against the dark expanse of space. Lights flickered along its hull, a heartbeat in the infinite night. Humans had built it decades ago as a research outpost, but now it served as a neutral meeting ground between species. Among the many alien delegations, one had captured more attention than all others. The Zila, an insectoid race with shimmering exoskeletons and a hive mind so complex that even their own people sometimes struggled to understand it. At the heart of their delegation was their queen, a being of immense intellect and subtle grace. She was unlike anything the human mind could easily categorize, an alien mind, wrapped in a strange elegance that inspired awe and fear in equal measure. Lieutenant Kale Darris had been stationed on the outer rim of the station for 3 months. He had trained for situations far more dangerous than diplomatic visits, but nothing could have prepared him for what he now witnessed. The Zila Queen had arrived aboard her personal shuttle, escorted by a dozen heavily armored guards. Every movement of the Queen was measured, deliberate, and full of silent authority. Even the human observers, who prided themselves on their bravery, found themselves instinctively bowing in respect. Kale's orders were simple: maintain security, observe, and report. But the moment he first saw the Queen, a strange instinct stirred within him. Something told him that the presence of this alien ruler was far more dangerous than anyone realized, and that danger might not come from her directly. The station's corridors were quiet, almost too quiet as Kale patrolled them with his standard-issue plasma rifle slung across his chest. The hum of the life support systems was the only sound, punctuated occasionally by the distant murmur of alien voices. Kale had seen many delegations, but the Zila were different. They communicated in bursts of light from their exoskeletons, subtle patterns that conveyed emotion, warning, or agreement. It was beautiful and terrifying in its complexity. On the second day of the Queen's stay, a tremor of unease passed through the station. Reports came in of minor systems failures, seemingly random malfunctions of doors, lights, and communications. Kale and his team investigated, finding nothing obvious. No evidence of sabotage, no indication of a threat. Yet the feeling of being watched, the sense of imminent danger, grew stronger. By the third day, Kale began noticing it for himself. Shadows seemed to cling to corners where no light should reach. The hum of the station sometimes shifted, like a tone of warning only his mind could detect. He had been trained to recognize stress in his own crew and in others, but this was different. This was primal, an instinct telling him that the Queen's presence was not just diplomatic. Something was coming, and it would not be gentle. It was during the 4th night cycle that the first attack came. Kale had been stationed near the docking bay, watching the shuttles arrive and depart when the alarm screamed through the station. Red lights flooded the corridors as automated defenses activated. Security teams scrambled, but what they faced was unlike anything the station had prepared for. Creatures, hulking, shadowy, and impossibly fast, burst from the airlocks. They were silent except for the scraping of their claws against metal, moving like smoke in a storm. Kale barely had time to aim before the creatures struck the first line of guards, throwing them aside as if they were dolls. The Zila Queen's guards responded instantly, forming a defensive barrier around her. But even they were pushed back with shocking speed. Kyle realized in a heartbeat that these attackers were not human. They were not from any known alien race either. Their bodies were irregular, almost amorphous, and yet they had intelligence. They avoided Kale at first, focusing only on the Queen, their movements precise, their strategy almost surgical. Amid the chaos, Kale's instincts kicked in. While others ran, he advanced. He ducked under a sweeping claw, fired a plasma burst into the shadows, and shouted orders to scattered security teams. His heart pounded, but his mind remained clear. One truth emerged above all. The Queen had to be protected. The Zila Queen moved with surprising speed, even within the protective circle of her guards. She did not scream or shout. She did not panic. Instead, she communicated through a pattern of light across her exoskeleton, sending silent orders that her guards obeyed instinctively. Kale watched as her shielded team responded with flawless precision, yet even they began to fall back under the relentless onslaught. Then it happened. One of the shadow creatures lunged directly at the Queen, faster than any human eye could track. Kale reacted without hesitation. He fired, striking the creature in its midsection, and felt it shatter under the energy blast. But the Queen's guard nearest to her stumbled, forcing her to step back unprotected for the first time. Without thinking, Kyle moved forward. His rifle ready, he positioned himself between the Queen and the advancing shadow creature. He felt the heat of its energy in his bones, the inevitability of the strike, but he did not flinch. As the creature lunged, Kyle shot again, scoring a direct hit. The creature recoiled, giving the Queen a momentary opening. The Queen paused, tilting her head toward him. A wave of light pulsed from her exoskeleton, a pattern Kale would later come to understand as gratitude mixed with warning. He nodded, understanding that the battle was far from over. By the time reinforcements arrived, the creatures had retreated. They melted back into the shadows of the station, leaving devastation in their wake. The corridors were littered with debris, smoke, and injured personnel. Kale and the Queen's remaining guards regrouped, forming a protective formation around her as medics rushed in. The station commander arrived moments later, his face pale but composed. "Lieutenant Darris," he said, voice steady. "That was unprecedented." "How did you—" Kyle did not answer. His eyes remained on the Queen, who was surveying the damage around her. She seemed calm, almost regal despite the chaos. He realized then that she was not frightened by the attack. She was studying it, analyzing it, and perhaps already planning her response. "I don't know who they were," Kyle finally said, "but they came for her. We need to protect the Queen at all costs. If they return and we're not ready—" His voice trailed off. The Queen extended one of her limbs slightly, touching Kale's arm in a gesture of recognition. The lights on her exoskeleton shifted gently, conveying something he could not yet interpret fully, but the meaning was clear. She acknowledged his courage. And perhaps in her own alien way she trusted him. That night, Kale did not sleep. He patrolled the damaged corridors, checking systems, making sure nothing had been overlooked. The shadow of the attack lingered in his mind. Something had changed. The Zila Queen's presence was no longer just a diplomatic engagement. She was a target, and Kale understood that the safety of an entire alien species now rested in part on human hands. As he walked past the observation windows overlooking the endless void, Kyle felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. The stars stretched infinitely, cold and indifferent, but the Queen's light, faintly shimmering from her shuttle below, offered a strange comfort. She was alien. She was unknowable. Yet she had survived this first attack, and somehow he knew she would survive more. The station hummed softly around him, carrying the whispers of life and the echoes of chaos. Kale tightened his grip on his rifle, glancing once more toward the Queen's location. The battle had begun, though the enemy had only revealed a fraction of its power. And when the next wave came, he vowed silently, he would stand where the guards had faltered. He would not run. He would protect her, because when the guards ran, the human would remain. The station lay in silence after the first attack, but the calm was fragile, like ice over a deep river. Lieutenant Kale Darris moved carefully through the corridors, each step measured, each glance sharp. The Zila Queen had retreated to a secured section of the station, her guards forming a protective ring around her, but the tension was palpable. Every system failure, every flicker of light, now felt like a warning. Kyle had seen many dangers in his career: pirates, rogue AI, even hostile alien species. But nothing had shaken him like the shadow creatures. Their speed, their intelligence, and their precision made them unlike any threat he had faced. And, most importantly, they had attacked for a single purpose: the Queen. In the command center, the station's leadership held an emergency meeting. Human officers, alien diplomats, and Zila advisors crowded around the central table. The Queen did not attend. Instead, she projected her presence through a series of pulses and lights across the station's communication panels, a method the humans struggled to interpret fully. Her guards whispered translations explaining that she was observing, analyzing the attacker's behavior, and preparing for the next move. Kale leaned over the table, pointing at a display showing recent damage patterns. "These creatures are not random. Look at this," he said. "They bypassed our outer defenses, ignored most of our patrols, and went straight for the Queen. They understand the layout. They are coordinated. They are hunting." One of the alien advisors, a small amphibious species with webbed hands, tilted its head. "Hunting is accurate," it said in a cautious tone. "They are not mindless. They do not act without purpose. This is a targeted strike, likely pre-planned. Whoever or whatever controls them knows your station intimately." The station commander, A tall human with a stern face rubbed his jaw. If they come again, our current defenses will not hold. We need a plan to protect the Queen, and fast. Any suggestions? Kale spoke before anyone else. We need to understand them first. We can't just react. We need to study their behavior, predict their attacks, and be ready for every scenario. He paused. And we need to keep the Queen safe no matter what. That's priority one. A murmur of agreement ran through the room. The Queen's guards, who had joined the meeting, nodded in unison. They trusted Kale now, more than they trusted most humans. He had proven himself during the first attack, standing between the Queen and certain death. That trust carried weight, and Kale felt it settle like armor around his chest. By mid-cycle, the station was on high alert. Surveillance drones hovered in every corridor. Sensors scanned for movement, and patrols doubled their frequency. Kale walked alongside the Queen's guards, inspecting the defensive positions. The Xyla Queen herself remained calm, seated in the center of a reinforced chamber, her light patterns pulsing in steady rhythm. Even surrounded by her armored protectors, her presence radiated authority. Kale glanced at her, noticing subtle shifts in her exoskeleton's color. "Are you anticipating them?" he asked quietly. A guard nearest to her translated her light patterns. She senses danger approaching, not fully visible yet. She predicts they will strike again, and she is readying her countermeasures. Kale nodded, feeling both awe and unease. He had trained for combat, but predicting an invisible, intelligent enemy was a challenge that required more than skill. It required intuition, patience, and courage. Hours passed with little incident, but then the shadows returned. The lights flickered, then dimmed entirely, leaving the station in darkness. Alarms blared as emergency lighting bathed the corridors in red. Kale's heart thumped as he gripped his rifle tighter. "They're back," one of the guards whispered. From the darkness, shapes began to emerge. The shadow creatures moved with the same speed and precision as before, but now they appeared more coordinated. They split into small squads, some moving toward the Queen's chamber, others cutting off escape routes. Kale's training kicked in. He ordered his team to flank the creatures, cutting them off while keeping a protective perimeter around the Queen. Gunfire lit the dark corridors. Plasma bolts streaked past, striking the creatures, but many continued advancing as if impervious to injury. Kale noticed something odd. The creatures seemed to avoid certain areas. Wherever the Queen's guards positioned themselves, the shadows hesitated, almost as if respecting some invisible boundary. The Queen's light patterns shifted rapidly, almost like a heartbeat. Her guards reacted instantly, forming a tighter circle around her, moving as a single coordinated unit. Kale realized something important. The Queen's presence wasn't just symbolic. It affected the behavior of the enemy. Thinking quickly, Kale adjusted his strategy. "Keep them away from her, but don't chase blindly. Let them come closer. We need to learn their pattern." He fired a controlled series of shots targeting the creature's limbs, forcing them into predictable paths. The Queen's guards followed his lead, using their advanced agility to control the battlefield. The creatures paused, regrouped, and then surged again. Kale felt the pressure of their assault, the way they tested every weak point, every gap in the defense. But the human and Xyla forces held firm. Slowly, steadily, Kale and the Queen's team began to push them back, corridor by corridor. During a brief lull, Kale knelt beside the Queen's protective shield, scanning the remains of one of the creatures. Its form shimmered and almost melted, leaving no clear trace. "They're not like anything I've ever seen," Kale muttered. "They adapt. They learn." The Queen's guard translated her light pulse. "They are evolving. Each strike teaches them. Each failure strengthens them." "Be cautious," Kale swallowed. The danger was far greater than he had imagined. These creatures weren't just attacking, they were learning, improving, and preparing for an eventual breakthrough. And when that happened, even the Queen's extraordinary defenses might not be enough. Hours stretched into cycles, and the station continued to hold. The Queen remained calm, her presence a beacon of focus in the chaos. Kale realized something else. Despite the alien differences, there was a connection forming between him and the Queen. It was not friendship, not yet, but mutual recognition. He had proven himself willing to stand between her and death, and she acknowledged it in ways beyond words. Late in the station's night cycle, Kyle returned to the observation deck. The void outside was infinite, cold, and silent. Stars sparkled faintly, distant and indifferent, yet the Queen's shuttle glowed softly in the docking bay, a light of intelligence and life in the dark. Kale's mind raced with questions. Who had sent the creatures? Why were they hunting the Queen? And how many more attacks would come before they discovered a way to overcome the station's defenses? A sudden pulse of light from the Queen's chamber drew his attention. Her pattern was urgent, a warning. Kale rushed back, finding her guards ready, weapons poised, eyes scanning the shadows. Kale felt the weight of responsibility heavier than ever. The station was not just a research facility now. It was a battlefield, and he was a key defender. Minutes later, the creatures struck again, faster and more coordinated than before. Kale and the guards met them with disciplined precision. Plasma fire, tactical maneuvers, and strategic retreats allowed them to control the flow of battle. But Kale knew it was only a temporary solution. The creatures were studying them, learning their responses, and soon that advantage would be gone. During a brief pause in the fighting, Kale spoke to the Queen's guard closest to him. We can't hold them forever. We need to find their leader, or the source controlling them. If we can stop that, we might end this before it gets worse. The guard hesitated, then nodded. Translating the Queen's light pattern, he said, She agrees. Observation alone is not enough. Action is needed, but action must be precise, coordinated, and without hesitation. You will be part of it. Kale felt the enormity of that statement. The Queen was involving him directly in her strategy, trusting him beyond the normal bounds of alliance. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. He was human, one man in a station full of threats, and yet in this moment he was indispensable. As the first light of the station's morning cycle washed over the corridors, the battle quieted once more. The shadow creatures retreated into the unknown, leaving the station battered but intact. Kale moved among the survivors, checking the wounded, helping to restore defenses and ensuring the Queen's safety. For the first time, he allowed himself to breathe. The threat was far from over, but the Queen remained alive, her light pattern steady and calm. And Kale knew one thing with absolute certainty. When the guards faltered, when others ran in fear, he would remain. Always. Outside, the void stretched endlessly, indifferent yet watchful. The Queen's light shone as a promise of survival and of challenge, and somewhere, hidden in the shadows, the enemy was learning, preparing, and waiting. Kyle tightened his grip on his rifle, glanced once more at the Queen, and whispered a silent vow. No matter what came next, he would protect her, because in this battle, when the guards ran, the human remained. The station had endured 2 attacks, yet the threat of the shadow creatures lingered like smoke in the corridors. Lieutenant Kale Darris walked the dimly lit halls, his senses stretched to the limit. Every creak, every flicker of the lights set his instincts on edge. The first 2 assaults had tested his courage and skill, but he knew that surviving the next attack would require more than raw strength. It would require understanding. The Zila Queen remained in her chamber, her presence calm and commanding. Kale often paused outside the reinforced doors, studying her movements through the observation panel. Even in rest, she radiated focus. The patterns of light pulsing along her exoskeleton conveyed something more than reassurance. They suggested calculation, strategy, and perhaps a silent question. Could he meet the challenge ahead? Kale tightened his grip on his rifle. He had never faced an enemy like this before. The shadow creatures were not mere beasts. They were intelligent predators. Each strike revealed a new level of cunning, as though they learned from every encounter. If the attacks continued, even the Queen's extraordinary defenses might be insufficient. The station commander called an urgent meeting in the command center. Humans, Zila guards, and alien advisors crowded around the central display. A holographic map of the station showing previous attack paths, damaged areas, and points of interest. Kyle studied the map carefully. They strike with purpose, he said. Every attack has a pattern, but it's changing, adapting. If we can predict their next move, we can stop them before they reach the Queen again. One of the Zila advisors, a tall being with translucent skin and glowing veins, inclined its head. Observation alone may not suffice. The Queen senses their origin in part. She believes the creatures are guided by a central intelligence. If we can locate it, the attacks may be halted. Kyle's brow furrowed. A central intelligence? Are you saying someone or something is controlling them? The advisor's glowing eyes blinked slowly. Yes, the Queen interprets their behavior as deliberate, coordinated, and guided. If this entity is found, it may be vulnerable. But caution is necessary. The intelligence itself is highly adaptive. Kale nodded. That was the first clue that could lead to victory. But finding the source of the attacks would not be simple. The shadow creatures were invisible in most sensors, immune to ordinary weapons and capable of striking with terrifying speed. Every moment wasted could cost lives. The Queen's guard nearest to the command center stepped forward. His voice was firm, translating her light pulses. She suggests a reconnaissance team. She will accompany you. Together you may trace the origin of these attackers. You must move carefully. The shadows are watching. Kale's heart raced. The Queen herself wanted him to accompany a mission into the unknown. It was a dangerous task, but also an honor. He nodded sharply. We'll do it. Let's move carefully and stay together. One mistake could be fatal. Hours later, Kale and a team of Zila guards prepared for departure. They suited up, checked their weapons, and loaded specialized sensors designed to detect the shadow creature's presence. The Queen remained behind a protective barrier, observing them with steady, calculating pulses of light. Her confidence in him was clear, and it strengthened his resolve. The shuttle launched into the unlit corridors of the station's lower sectors, areas rarely visited except for maintenance. These regions had been affected most during the previous attacks. As the shuttle moved silently, Kale reviewed the data collected from previous encounters. The shadow creatures had left faint traces, heat disturbances, air vibrations, and subtle shifts in electromagnetic fields. Nothing tangible, but enough to suggest they were more than physical beings. The first checkpoint revealed the remnants of the creature's earlier strike. Burned walls, twisted metal, and faint scorch marks indicated where the battle had raged. Kale scanned carefully. They were here. We need to follow these disturbances. Every mark, every fluctuation could lead us to their source. The team advanced cautiously, using their sensors to detect subtle anomalies. It took hours to navigate the narrow corridors, their progress slow but deliberate. Kale felt the tension tighten around him like a vice. Every shadow seemed to flicker with life, every sound magnified. The creatures had not yet appeared, but their presence was palpable. Suddenly, the sensors reacted. A low-frequency hum pulsed through Kyle's suit, signaling the proximity of the creatures. He motioned for the team to halt. Through the darkness, he could see faint ripples in the air, like smoke moving against the wind. The shadows were near, observing, studying, perhaps even anticipating their moves. Kale signaled to the team. Stay sharp. Don't engage unless necessary. We need to trace them, not fight them. Yet, minutes passed, each one stretching endlessly. Then a new disturbance appeared ahead. The air shimmered and bent as if the station itself were aware of their intrusion. And then Kale saw it. A dark form, larger and more complex than any creature they had faced. It pulsed with energy, shifting constantly, a living shadow of impossible form. The Queen's guards whispered nervously. Kale's fingers tightened on his rifle. This must be it, he said. This is what's controlling them. The shadow intelligence observed them silently. Then, without warning, it split into multiple smaller forms, each one darting toward the team. Kale fired, carefully aiming at areas where sensors indicated the creature's cores. The projectiles passed through most of them harmlessly, but a few dissipated into nothing. The intelligence was testing them, probing defenses and learning from their responses. Kale's mind raced. We need to stay together and focus. Don't let it surround us. The creatures hesitated when the Queen's light pulse reached them through their comlink. Though she remained behind a reinforced barrier, her influence was undeniable. The smaller shadows recoiled slightly, almost in fear or respect. Kale realized the truth. The Queen's presence was not just defensive, it was a deterrent. Her mind, her power, could influence even the creature's behavior remotely. Follow my lead, Kyle shouted. We're going to flush it out. Sensors and lights on. Force it into the open. The team executed the maneuver with precision. Flashing lights and targeted energy pulses created a corridor of forced movement, guiding the intelligence toward an open maintenance bay. There, Kale saw it fully, a swirling, writhing mass of shadows pulsating with faint glimmers of energy. It was like nothing he had ever imagined, both alive and not alive, intelligent and chaotic. Kale's pulse raced. We need a plan. We can't destroy it outright, it adapts too quickly. But if we can isolate it, trap it, or disrupt its control over the others, we might survive the next attack. One of the Xyla guards spoke cautiously. The Queen may provide guidance. Her light pattern suggests she knows its weaknesses. Observe her signals carefully. Act immediately when instructed. Kyle nodded, understanding the stakes. The Queen's light began to pulse in rapid sequences, sending a series of patterns that the guards translated. Disrupt its connection. Force separation. Contain it temporarily. It cannot withstand direct interference in its own field of control. Kale moved quickly, coordinating the team to deploy energy nets, electromagnetic pulses, and sensor distortions. The shadow intelligence reacted violently, lashing out with smaller minions, but the traps began to take effect. Pieces of it flickered, twisted, and dissolved, and for the first time Kale felt a sense of hope. "This is working," he shouted. "Keep it contained. Don't let it escape." The creatures shrieked in inhuman sounds, shadows rippling violently, but the combined efforts of the human and Xyla team held firm. Kyle watched as the intelligence's form faltered, weakening under the Queen's indirect control and the tactical maneuvers. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the mass recoiled, shrinking into a single, smaller form that remained confined in the energy nets. Kale exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. The reconnaissance mission had succeeded. The source of the attacks had been located and contained, at least temporarily. He glanced at the Queen through their comm link. Her lights pulsed steadily, no panic, only calm calculation. The message was clear. They had gained an advantage, but the battle was far from over. The shadow intelligence was still alive, still dangerous, and still learning. Kale allowed himself a small moment of relief. For the first time since the attacks began, he felt that victory was possible. But he also understood that the next steps would be more dangerous than anything they had faced. The intelligence would not be passive. It would strike back, and the station and the Queen would be its target once again. As the team returned to the Queen's chamber, Kale felt a deeper sense of purpose. He was not just a soldier or a protector. He was a crucial part of a strategy that could decide the survival of a species, both human and Xyla. The bond forming between him and the Queen was no longer just trust. It was partnership, forged in the fires of battle and the shadows of the unknown. The void outside the station remained indifferent, but within the walls a new resolve had taken hold. Kale would face whatever came next. He would stand between danger and the Queen, and when the shadows came again, he would not run. He would remain. The station had been quiet for only a few cycles after the reconnaissance mission. Lieutenant Kale Darris walked the corridors with a tense awareness, every sound amplified, every shadow a potential threat. The temporary containment of the shadow intelligence had given the station a brief respite, but Kale knew that calm would not last. The enemy was clever, patient, and adaptable, and it would strike again with renewed force. The Xyla Queen remained in her fortified chamber, her light patterns shifting subtly as if reading the thoughts of those around her. Kale often paused outside her observation window, watching the rhythm of her pulses. Each flicker of color, each sequence of light carried meaning. To humans, it seemed almost like music, but for Kale it had become a form of guidance, a silent language he had begun to understand. The station's command center buzzed with activity. Human officers, Xyla advisors, and security teams coordinated to strengthen defenses, repair damage, and prepare for a counterstrike. Sensors had been upgraded, patrols doubled, and energy barriers reinforced. But the shadow intelligence's presence loomed like a specter over every decision. Kale addressed the team, his voice steady despite the tension. "We've contained the intelligence, but that doesn't mean it's gone. It's learning, adapting. Every move we make, it watches. Every weakness we show, it records. We need to hit first and hit smart." The commander nodded. "Agreed, but how? Conventional weapons won't stop it. We've seen that." Kale glanced at the Queen's guards, then at the observation link to her chamber. The translation came quickly. The intelligence responds to indirect influence. It fears interference in its own control field. Disrupt it and it will weaken. We must act together. Kale's mind raced. He understood now what the Queen meant. They had a strategy, a way to strike at the core of the threat, but timing, precision, and coordination were essential. Any misstep could allow the intelligence to escape, regroup, and attack again, this time stronger. The plan was set. Kale, alongside a select team of Xyla guards, would lead a counterstrike into the lower sectors, following the traces of the shadow intelligence. They would use sensor nets, energy pulses, and controlled corridors to isolate it, while the Queen remained behind a protective barrier, exerting her subtle influence on the enemy. As the shuttle descended into the station's lower sectors, Kale's nerves tightened. The corridors were darker than before, the air heavy with tension. The shadows seemed to cling to the walls, almost alive, almost waiting. Kale signaled to the team to stay close. "Remember, we're not just reacting. We're forcing it into a trap. Stick to the plan, stay alert, and trust your instincts." Hours of careful navigation brought them closer to the containment area, where the shadow intelligence had been first restrained. The energy net still flickered faintly, a testament to the previous encounter. Kale moved forward, scanning every corner, every crevice, every anomaly. Then, without warning, the intelligence struck. Shadows erupted from the walls, slithering and coiling with blinding speed. Kale's team fired, but many shots passed through harmlessly. The enemy had adapted again, learning from the first encounter. Kale's voice cut through the chaos. "Form a perimeter. Use the sensor nets. Don't let them surround us." The Queen's influence pulsed through the comm link, her light sequences guiding the team with perfect timing. "Push it toward the open bay. Use the energy barriers. Contain it fully before it adapts further." Kale coordinated the movements, signaling the guards to deploy nets, barriers, and pulses. The intelligence reacted violently, sending smaller shadow forms to attack, testing their defenses. Kale moved with precision, targeting weak points, maintaining focus under pressure. The Queen's light patterns were constant, a beacon of guidance that seemed to give the team strength beyond their own limits. As they pushed the intelligence toward the open bay, Kale noticed something disturbing. It was changing, evolving faster than before. Its form shimmered with new patterns, darker, more complex, as if learning from every pulse, every trap, every defensive maneuver. "We need to speed this up," Kale shouted. "If it adapts completely, we lose our advantage." The Zila guards followed his lead, using agility and coordination to force the intelligence into the final containment zone. Kale activated the energy nets, creating a cage of pulsing barriers. The intelligence writhed and twisted, striking out with smaller shadows, but could not escape the combined efforts of the human and Zila team. Finally, the intelligence was contained, fully trapped within the energy net. It pulsed violently, shadows flickering, but it could not move. Kale allowed himself a moment of relief, though he knew this victory was temporary. He glanced at the comm link, reading the Queen's light pulses. The translation came, "You have contained it, but it is not defeated. It will return stronger. Prepare, strengthen, learn. Together, we will endure." Kyle nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. This was not the end, it was only the beginning of a larger conflict. But for now, the station was safe and the Queen remained unharmed. The shuttle returned to the Queen's chamber, the team exhausted but triumphant. Kale watched as the Queen's lights shifted in a calm rhythm, a sign of approval and acknowledgement. The bond between human and alien, forged in battle, had strengthened further. As they debriefed in the command center, Kale addressed the team. "We've learned something important today. The intelligence is adaptive, but it has limits. We can contain it, disrupt it, and influence it. And we have an advantage the enemy cannot anticipate, the Queen herself. Her presence changes the rules of engagement." The commander nodded. "This will require constant vigilance. We can't underestimate them again. Every system, every patrol, every defense must be maintained at peak readiness." Kale's mind was already racing ahead. They had survived, but survival alone was not enough. They needed a strategy that would allow them not just to defend, but to take the fight to the intelligence itself, to understand its origin, and to ensure the Queen's safety permanently. Later, as Kale walked the corridors alone, he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Every decision, every action could mean life or death for the Queen and the station. But he did not fear it. He had faced the shadows, stood between them and the Queen, and survived. And he knew he would do it again, no matter what came. Outside, the void remained silent, cold, and infinite. But within the station, life persisted, lights glimmered, and a new resolve took hold. Kale's determination burned brighter than ever. He would remain vigilant. He would protect the Queen. And when the shadows returned, he would be ready, not just to survive, but to fight, to endure, and to win. Because when the guards ran, The human remained. The station trembled under the weight of anticipation. Lieutenant Kale Darris walked the corridors with purpose, every step measured, every sense alert. The shadow intelligence they had contained in the lower sectors was restless, pulsing and writhing as though it sensed their presence. Kale knew this would be the final confrontation. The creatures had learned from every encounter, adapting faster than ever. This time there would be no warning, only the battle to come. The Xyla Queen remained calm in her fortified chamber, her light pulses rhythmic and steady. Even in the midst of danger, she radiated focus. Kale had spent countless hours learning to read her subtle signals. Each shift in color and intensity carried meaning, warning, strategy, encouragement. It had become a silent language between them, one that transcended words. "Lieutenant," one of the Xyla guards said, translating her light pulses. "The Queen advises immediate engagement. The intelligence cannot remain contained any longer. It will strike back if it senses weakness. You must lead the assault." Kyle nodded, gripping his rifle tighter. "We're ready. We'll hit it together, coordinated and precise. No mistakes." The counter-strike team moved swiftly through the station's darkened corridors. Sensors flickered as they scanned for anomalies. Energy nets and pulse emitters primed for deployment. The team's focus was sharp. The shadow creatures were unpredictable, fast and intelligent, but Kale had a plan. The intelligence had begun to adapt, its form twisting and flowing, shifting between solid and shadow. Kale observed it cautiously through the tactical display. It was aware of their presence, aware of the barriers and traps, and it had begun to probe for weaknesses. "We need to anticipate its moves," Kale said. "Watch its pattern. The moment it reacts, we hit it with everything we have. Timing is everything." The team advanced cautiously, moving through narrow corridors where the intelligence had previously struck. Shadows flickered along the walls, almost alive, almost sentient. Every motion, every sound seemed amplified in the tense silence. Then, without warning, the intelligence struck. The shadow creatures erupted from the walls and vents, faster and more coordinated than ever. Kale's team fired plasma bursts and deployed energy nets, but many shots passed harmlessly through the twisting shadows. The intelligence was testing them, probing for errors. Kyle's voice rang out. "Form a circle. Protect each other. Stay focused." The Queen's influence pulsed through the comlink, her light patterns guiding their movements with precision. "Force it into the open bay. Disrupt its connection. Strike together. Do not falter." Kale led the team with determination. They maneuvered through the corridors using sensor data and the Queen's guidance to drive the intelligence toward a pre-planned trap. Energy nets flashed to life. Barriers rose from the floor, and the shadows began to retreat, forced into a confined space. The intelligence reacted violently, sending smaller shadow forms darting toward the team. Kyle fired with accuracy, targeting the cores of the creatures, while the Xyla guards used agility and precision to maintain the perimeter. The intelligence twisted and pulsed, trying to adapt, but the team's coordination and the Queen's influence held firm. As they reached the open bay, Kale realized this was the moment of truth. The energy nets and barriers formed a cage around the intelligence. It writhed violently, attempting to escape, but its movement was restricted. Kale activated the final sequence of pulses, designed to disrupt the connection controlling the smaller creatures. The shadows screamed in an unearthly sound, twisting and flickering under the force of the pulses. The smaller creatures dissipated, leaving the intelligence exposed. Kale saw an opportunity. A single, precise strike could neutralize it temporarily, giving the station a chance to recover. "Ready," he shouted. The team fired in unison. Energy beams struck the intelligence at its core, forcing it into retreat. The shadows shrieked and writhed. Then, with a final surge of light from the Queen's chamber, the intelligence convulsed and collapsed into a confined, inert mass. Kale dropped to his knees, breathing heavily. The team moved quickly to secure the area, checking sensors and ensuring that no smaller forms remained. The shadow intelligence was contained, its threat neutralized, for now. Through the comlink, the Queen's light pulses shifted slowly, steady, and calm. The translation came, "You have succeeded. The threat is diminished, but vigilance must remain. You have proven yourself worthy of trust and alliance." Kale allowed himself a small smile, feeling the weight of relief wash over him. The station was safe, the Queen unharmed, and the shadow intelligence neutralized. But he knew the victory was not just about survival. It was about partnership, trust, and courage. As they returned to the Queen's chamber, Kale felt a quiet pride. The bond between human and Zila had deepened. Forged in the fires of battle and the shadows of the unknown, the Queen's guards acknowledged him with subtle nods, a sign of respect that went beyond words. In the observation chamber, the Queen extended a limb, touching Kyle's arm gently. Her light pulses conveyed something profound: gratitude, respect, and recognition. Kale nodded, understanding the silent message. They were allies, partners in a struggle that transcended species, language, and fear. The station commander entered the chamber, his expression serious but relieved. "Lieutenant Darris, the station owes you a debt it cannot repay. Your courage and leadership have saved lives today." Kyle shook his head. "We all did this together. I only stood where I had to. The Queen's guidance, her guards, the entire team, we survived because we acted as one." The Queen's lights pulsed softly, a quiet affirmation. Kale felt a strange warmth in that moment, a sense that he had not only protected a life but had become part of something greater, a bond between species, a moment of trust and understanding that would last beyond the battles to come. The station slowly returned to normal operations. Systems were repaired, patrols re-established, and sensors monitored the lower sectors where the shadow intelligence had been contained. Kale continued his watch, his vigilance unwavering. He knew that threats might arise again, but he also knew that he would never falter. As he walked through the corridors, Kyle glanced at the Queen's chamber. Her light pulses were steady, calm, and reassuring. He understood now that courage was not just about facing danger. It was about choosing to stand when others ran, about protecting life in the face of impossible odds, and about forging trust where it seemed impossible. Outside the station, the void stretched endlessly, silent and indifferent. Stars glimmered faintly, distant and cold, yet within the station life endured. Humans, Zila, and allies of many species shared a fragile peace, a shared victory that had been earned through courage, determination, and partnership. Kale adjusted his rifle, feeling the weight of responsibility, yet also the strength of purpose. He would remain vigilant, protect the Queen, and stand firm against any threat. He had faced shadows and emerged unbroken, and he knew that whatever the future held, he would not run, because when the guards ran, the human remained, and in that simple truth lay the promise of hope, courage, and the enduring power of humanity.